No time for an intro. We got Five Nights at Venom's Part 2. Let's create some chaos. Woo! Springtrap crawled his way through the vents of the building. The security guard was sitting in a room just ahead of him. Now was his chance. A chance to kill again after many, many years. He was about to reach the open room when he heard the high-pitched voice of a child echo from somewhere behind him. He knew he shouldn't, but it was within his heightened instincts to chase after them. With no room to turn around, Springtrap backed up through the vents to where he believed the voice was coming from. For nearly 30 years, William Afton had sat in the darkened back room of Freddy Fazbear's, rebuilding his strength after the spring bodysuit he tried to hide in malfunctioned. Just as he was about to take his final breath, he noticed an inky red mass clambering towards him. He felt the creature attach itself to him and expand over his body. The pain of the spring locks puncturing every part of him began to gradually fade. His breathing steadied and his strength ceased to deteriorate. Over time, the symbiote attempted to heal Afton, only it couldn't distinguish between what was human and what was mechanical. As a result, Afton, the springlock suit, and the massive red tentacles became a single entity, Springtrap. Springtrap remained conscious in the dark room of the abandoned pizzeria until he was discovered by a couple of utility workers. They were scavenging Freddy's to find components to use in a new pizza place that was in the works of being built. A voice spoke inside Afton's mind and told him to remain dormant and refrain from attacking the workers for the time being. Afton obeyed and let the men hoist him up and carry him out of the building, into a truck that was plastered with the logo for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place. Afton was surprised the franchise was still operational after what he'd done, but he remained still and let himself be taken to the new restaurant. When the truck arrived, Springtrap was taken into a room where all he could hear was the recording of a voice instructing someone through a process of a maintenance check on him. Springtrap swore he knew the voice on the recorder, but he couldn't place it after 3 decades in solitude. It was torturous for Afton not to react to the sounds coming from the recorder, but the voice in his head assured him that it was best if he remained still for a little while longer. Once the maintenance check was completed, the person in charge took Springtrap and put him into a dark room in the back of the restaurant. Afton nearly tore his head off trying to claw out the voice that told him not to react, only for it to land him in another dark room. But the voice only told him to wait for night to fall. When night came, the voice told Afton that the security guard was in a room that could easily be accessed through the ventilation system. Springtrap got up and crawled his way through the maze of vents trying to find the room. But what the voice failed to mention was that the security guard had preventative measures to confuse and disorient Springtrap. Every so often, a high-pitched voice would play from somewhere in the vents, triggering Afton's bloodlust and forcing him to find the source of the noise. Springtrap tried for hours, but he couldn't find his way to the security guard's office. As the next day began, Afton retreated to the back room, ready to try again the following night. Over the next few days, Springtrap saw a few more animatronics being brought into the back room, each one looking eerily similar to him, with tentacles of various colors snaking across their metallic bodies. Then, after 4 or 5 days, Afton saw an animatronic that almost made him break his dormant facade. A mangled clown with pigtails and dull green eyes was reeled into the back room. It looked like it had gone through hell and back, but Afton recognized it as the animatronic that killed his daughter, Elizabeth, when she had gotten too close to it despite his warnings. Each night, Springtrap and the other animatronics attempted to navigate through the vents into the security office. Each night, Springtrap believed that they had the guard outnumbered, but all the animatronics seemed to be susceptible to the same high-pitched voice. Night after night, none of the animatronics were able to reach the security office. Once Elizabeth and the clown animatronic joined the rest of them, Springtrap was certain that would be the night they succeeded. During the day, Afton, Elizabeth, and the rest of the animatronics devised a plan to surround the office from all sides, making it harder for the security guard to deter all of them with the voice at the same time. The plan played out flawlessly. Splitting up and letting the others move toward the voice, both Afton and Elizabeth were able to reach the security office. However, just as they were about to crawl inside, the ventilation shafts to the office were closed off as a voice recording played throughout the building. It was the same voice that played during the maintenance check, and this time, Afton recognized it. It was the voice of his old partner, Henry Emily. Henry was talking about how it was the end of the line for all of them, how they would never hurt anyone again. Afton could feel the floor and the walls of the vents getting hotter as the voice in his head started freaking out. The voice was screaming how they needed to find a way out urgently, that his species was highly susceptible to fire. The walls began glowing red hot as Springtrap pounded and screamed to be let out. Flames erupted in the vents and quickly made their way towards him, consuming him in seconds. All was dark. All was quiet. There was no clear indication of what was up and what was down. It was all just there. But at the same time, there was nothing. A set of eyes appeared in the void and was soon followed by a face, then a head, shoulders, torso, and legs, until a full person appeared. Then the void began to take shape as a pizzeria, a perfect digital replica of Freddy Fazbear's. Vanessa turned her head and looked around the digital environment, surveying the level before jotting down any notes. What she failed to notice was a figure outlined in green, creeping behind a doorway off to the side of the restaurant. Vanessa took off her VR goggles in the real world, plunging the digital one back into darkness, where nothing but the figure remained. The figure tried to understand what was happening. It couldn't remember clearly what had happened prior to it waking up in the digital landscape. Suddenly, a disembodied voice cut through the void and rang in its ears. The voice explained that it was a symbiotic organism that was attached to the figure's physical body before it was destroyed. An old colleague trapped the figure and others like it in a building before burning it to the ground. The voice explained that, as a last-ditch effort of survival, it was able to transfer some of the figure's consciousness into the motherboard of the robot suit it was trapped in. The motherboard was later salvaged, and the data was used as a reference to make a video game related to the Freddy Fazbear franchise. As to why there was a video game being made about a pizzeria, the voice couldn't explain. Once more, Vanessa appeared in the void, and Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria appeared around her. She looked around, making mental notes of what had to be adjusted before she and the restaurant disappeared. In the darkness again, the voice spoke to the figure, and claimed it had a plan that would hopefully get them back into the physical world. Over the next long while, the organism that the voice belonged to began altering the code of the game whenever Vanessa would enter the digital space. The plan was to subtly influence Vanessa and infect her while she was in the game. Eventually, they would take over her body in the real world using the same abilities that the symbiote used to get Afton and it into the game. Except it wasn't easy. Vanessa was a skilled game developer and was able to recognize the changes in the code and fix them relatively quickly, putting the symbiote back at square one. Day by day, the symbiote tried harder and harder to hack into Vanessa's headset and take over her mind. Eventually, it had the idea to disguise the infection as collectibles within the game. That way, as Vanessa was playtesting the game, she would have to collect the secret items to make sure they worked, giving Afton and the symbiote access to her mind. Soon, Vanessa's mental fortitude was weakened, and with the help of the symbiote, Afton was able to take over her mind. From there, it was a game of patience to influence Vanessa's actions to get her to where Afton needed her to be. Through her memory and a little access to the internet, Afton saw that the Freddy Fazbear Corporation was in the process of building a mega mall called the Mega PizzaPlex. Afton and the symbiote knew they needed to get Vanessa in there to get access to the advanced technology within. Afton spoke to Vanessa through the symbiote that was slowly taking over her body. She tried her best to resist Afton's commands, but the symbiote already had enough control over her that her attempts were fruitless. Tentacles shot out of Vanessa's body and covered her from head to toe. Once fully immersed in the symbiote, Vanessa looked like she was wearing a rabbit suit similar to Afton's, only this one was a crimson red and skin tight. In a fury of rage, Vanessa destroyed all the game files, leaving a server intact so that Afton and the symbiote could survive, and made her way to the PizzaPlex. Afton and the symbiote had tried to be strategic and patient before, and it didn't end well for them. Now was the time for something different. Now was the time for Carnage. For this next image, I did something a little different, and I want to try out a little game. Let me know in the comments below if you think you know what it is. Let's get back into the story. Woo. Chaos was unfolding. The bodies of PizzaPlex workers were strewn across the floor. Shop windows were broken and all the dressing rooms along Rockstar Row were in complete disarray. Somewhat fortunately, it was nighttime and the PizzaPlex was closed, so there were no children inside. Almost. A young boy hid under the dressing table in Glamrock Freddy's room, trying to avoid the red rabbit. He didn't know what it was or what it was after, if it was even after anything at all. The rabbit didn't stop to interrogate or threaten anyone, it just killed whoever was in its way. Suddenly the door to the room hissed open and the boy heard the sound of hydraulic footsteps marching into the room. The boy sank further back against the wall and held his breath, hoping he wouldn't be found. The red rabbit did something to the animatronics in the PizzaPlex that made them just as violent and bloodthirsty as it was. The boy had to find a way out of the mall fast before it was too late. The footsteps got closer to the dressing table. The boy held his breath even harder as he saw a set of fingers grip the table and lift it off the ground. The boy nearly screamed, but threw his hands over his mouth before he could make a sound that would alert any more monsters to his presence. The boy looked up at the towering hunk of metal that stood over him, and inadvertently began to relax. The animatronic standing there was Glamrock Freddy, but he looked different from the others. While Freddy was still shiny, he had a metallic shine to him rather than the inky one that the others had. His eyes weren't soulless white voids, but rather had life in them. If the boy didn't know any better, he would have said it seemed almost human. When Freddy spoke, it sounded like his normal voice. No gravelly second voice was paired with it. Freddy even called the boy by his name, Gregory. He was hesitant, but Gregory figured trusting Freddy was his best bet at escaping the PizzaPlex. Fortunately for Gregory, Freddy had a cavity in his chest that was big enough for him to hide inside of. However, if the two were going to escape, they still needed to be careful to avoid the red rabbit and the other animatronics, lest Freddy were to get corrupted by the red tentacles as well. Freddy and Gregory moved quickly but quietly from Rockstar Row to the entrance of the mall. They were just about at the doors when they saw the red rabbit stalking around the entrance. Freddy ducked behind a flatbed of pipes that was meant to be put in storage. They waited for the rabbit to pass before they continued to the entrance, but when Freddy stood up from behind the pipes, he knocked into them, sending them cascading across the floor, making a symphony of loud crashes. The red rabbit turned around to look at the source of the noise, and threw its hands on its head as it tried to block out the noise. Tentacles began peeling away from its face, and from inside Freddy, Gregory could see that there was a young woman beneath the red inky mass. The woman seemed to be in pain, almost crying. She looked directly at Gregory, seemingly through Freddy, and mouthed the words, "Please help me," before the tentacles wrapped back around her face and the sinister grin of the red rabbit returned. The rabbit let out a blood-curdling screech as it alerted the animatronics to its location. Freddy turned and bolted off in the other direction, with Gregory still in his chest cavity. The two ran back to Rockstar Row and into the maintenance tunnels through the back door. Gregory exited Freddy's chest, breathing heavily. Whoever was in that rabbit suit was suffering. He couldn't just leave her behind, he had to help her. He turned towards Freddy and asked for help coming up with a plan to save her. The sound of the pipes hitting the ground appeared to have at least loosened the creature's grip on the woman. If they could recreate that same scenario at a larger scale, they might be able to sever the connection with the woman and maybe the other animatronics as well. Gregory decided their best plan of attack was to cover the entire mall with that ear-splitting sound through the building's PA system, which they could access from the performance stage at the center of the mall. They devised a plan. Freddy would bring Gregory to the performance stage to set up the PA system, while he would scour the nearby area for metal pipes that they could use to replicate the sound from before. They had to be extra careful now that the red rabbit and the animatronics were on high alert. Gregory cautiously tapped away at the screen to turn on the PA system, constantly checking over his shoulder and jumping at any little noise. Everything could go wrong so easily. The animatronics or the rabbit could spot him out in the open, giving him nowhere to hide, or any of them could infect Freddy while he was gathering the pipes, and he would lead them right back to him. He couldn't focus on that though. He had to make sure the PA system was live by the time Freddy returned. With a few more taps, Gregory got the PA system online just as he spotted Freddy making his way back to the stage. Except something wasn't right. Freddy was sprinting towards him at full speed, arms full of metal pipes and 3 animatronics plus the red rabbit right on his tail. Freddy made it to the stage as Gregory grabbed the microphone and held it in his direction. The red rabbit launched itself at them as Freddy brought one pipe down against another, sending a metallic shockwave through the microphone and echoing throughout the entire PizzaPlex. The red rabbit dropped to the ground like a stone and began writhing in pain. The tentacles slowly peeled away from the woman's body as Freddy brought the 2 pipes together again. Another wave of pain shot through the red rabbit as more and more tentacles fell off of them. Freddy banged the pipes into each other again and again until the woman was practically free. Gregory hopped off the stage and held out his hand toward the woman, just as her trembling hand reached out to grab his. Gregory struggled to pull the woman up, but with one more hit from the pipes, the red creature finally gave in and released all control of the woman. In the distance, Gregory could see the other animatronics wrestling to pull the creature off of themselves too. He looked down and saw that the once menacing red rabbit had been reduced to a few shriveled tentacles. Gregory and Vanessa walked away from the PizzaPlex as the sun rose, marking an end to the nightmare. And there we have it, Five Nights at Venom's Part 2. Admittedly, I did take a couple creative liberties to make sure the story worked better. Say creative liberties, I cut out like 3 games entirely, and once we got to Security Breach, it went off the rails completely. But I'm really happy with how the art turned out in this one, and I hope you did too. If you liked the art or had fun with the video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to see more stuff from me, you can check out, obviously, Five Nights at Venom's Part 1, or I've venomized some characters from the Amazing Digital Circus, which you can check out right here. But that's all I've got for you today. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is KyngPin Creations, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.